Okay, so you want to own a fish and chip shop. Find a corner unit on a high street. Get a fryer. Buy some cod. Wrap it in batter and serve it to hungry people. That is the plan in your head, and it is not a bad plan. Walk into any chippy on a Friday evening, and it looks like the easiest business in the world. The queue stretches out the door. Every table is taken. The fryers are roaring. There is a line of people waiting for takeaway orders and another line forming behind them. You watch that scene and you think this place must be making a fortune. More customers, more fish, more money. Simple. Here is the problem. You are looking at the one night of the week that lies to you the most. The truth is that a fish and chip shop is not really a food business. It is a margin business that happens to serve fish. And the moment you understand that difference, everything about how a chippy makes money and how it quietly bleeds to death starts to make sense. Let me start with what it actually costs to open the doors, because the price tag is a lot more complicated than lease a shop and buy a fryer. There is not one type of fish and chip shop. There are several, and each one is really a different business, wearing the same greasy apron. At the bottom end, you have the pure takeaway operation, a small unit sometimes under 500 square feet, with a counter, a frying range, and no seating at all. These can be opened for 50 to 150,000 pounds, depending on location and condition. Above that sits the traditional chippy with limited seating. A larger unit with maybe 20 to 40 covers, a proper frying range, display counters, and a small kitchen area. These typically require an investment of 150 to 300,000 pounds to fit out and open. Above that, you find the restaurant-style fish and chip shops, proper dining rooms with table service, licensed bars, and menus that extend well beyond the basic fish supper. These are a different business entirely, with startup costs that can run from 300,000 to over 700,000 pounds. Then there are the mobile operations, converted vans or trailers that work markets, festivals, and events. Lower startup costs of 20 to 80,000 pounds, but with their own unique set of challenges around pitch fees, licensing, and weather dependency. Each of these is a different bet on the same underlying question. Do you make your money from volume at low margins, or from a smaller number of customers paying more for a fuller experience? That single decision shapes every other number in the business. Now here is where the naive mental model starts to fall apart. You think the expensive part is the fish. It is not. The expensive part is the equipment needed to cook it properly and safely, and the building modifications required to house that equipment legally. A commercial frying range, the kind that can handle the volume a real chip shop needs, costs between 8 and 30,000 pounds depending on size and configuration. That range needs extraction, a commercial kitchen extraction system that removes grease-laden air, filters it, and pushes it outside without coating the neighboring buildings in the smell of frying oil, is not a household extractor fan. It is an engineered system that includes canopy hoods, grease filters, carbon filtration for odor control, and fire suppression equipment built directly into the ductwork. Installation costs for a proper extraction system run from 10 to 40,000 pounds. And this is not optional. Without proper extraction, you will not receive the environmental health approvals you need to operate. You will fail your fire safety assessment, and your neighbors will have you shut down through planning complaints before you have served your 100th customer. Then there is the matter of the oil itself and the drainage it requires. A busy chip shop can use between 50 and 200 liters of frying oil per week. That oil degrades with use and must be changed regularly. Used oil cannot go down a drain. It must be collected and removed by a licensed waste oil company. Your drainage system needs a grease trap, a device that separates fats and oils from wastewater before it enters the sewer system. Without one, you will eventually block the public sewer, earn a massive fine from the water authority, and potentially face prosecution. A commercial grease trap costs £1,000 to £5,000 to install and requires regular professional cleaning. The waste oil collection itself is a recurring cost. Though many waste oil companies will collect for free or even pay a small amount for used cooking oil, since it has value as biodiesel feedstock. Refrigeration is the next essential expense. Fish must be stored at or below -18 degrees Celsius if frozen, and between 0 and 2 degrees if fresh. You need walk-in cold storage or at minimum commercial refrigeration units, large enough to hold several days' worth of stock. A walk-in cold room costs £5,000 to £15,000 installed. Even standalone commercial freezers and refrigerators will cost £2,000 to £5,000 for a proper setup. And they need to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which means they contribute significantly to your electricity bill. And they need to be monitored constantly because a refrigeration failure overnight means hundreds of pounds worth of fish going straight into the bin. And a potential food safety incident that could cost you your hygiene rating. Speaking of hygiene ratings, this is the regulatory framework that every fish and chip shop operates under, and it has real financial consequences that most new owners do not fully appreciate. Every food business in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland receives a food hygiene rating from 0 to 5, based on inspections by the local authority environmental health team. A score of 5 means hygiene standards are very good. A score of 0 means urgent improvement is necessary. Here is why this matters financially. Since 2013, food businesses in Wales have been legally required to display their hygiene rating at the premises. England has not made display mandatory, but the ratings are published online where any potential customer can check them. A rating below 3 is devastating for trade. Customers check. Competitors will make sure customers know. And once a low score is public, it takes months to arrange a re-inspection, even after you have fixed every issue. The inspection covers 3 areas: how hygienically food is handled, prepared, and stored; the physical condition and cleanliness of the building, including layout, ventilation, and facilities; how the business manages food safety, including documentation, temperature records, and staff training. Failing on any of these areas can drag your score down, and a low score can reduce customer footfall by 20 to 40% overnight. Some new owners treat food safety paperwork as bureaucratic busy work, and that attitude costs them dearly when the inspector arrives unannounced. Add up the lease deposit, typically 3 to 6 months rent up front, the renovation and fit-out costs, the equipment, the extraction, the refrigeration, the initial stock, the licenses, the insurance, a food safety consultant to help you set up your management system, the signage, the point-of-sale system, the packaging, the opening marketing, and a cash reserve to survive your first few slow months. And even a modest takeaway, only Chip Shop can require £80,000 to £200,000 to open the doors. A sit-down chippy in a decent location can easily need £300,000 or more. That is before you have sold a single portion of cod. Now let us talk about what you are actually selling and why the margins are more complicated than they appear. Fish and chips sound simple. It is 2 ingredients plus oil. But the cost structure underneath those 2 ingredients is where the entire business lives or dies. Start with the fish. The British fish and chip trade is overwhelmingly built on 2 species, Atlantic cod and haddock. The price of these fish is not set by your supplier. It is set by global commodity markets, international fishing quotas, currency exchange rates, fuel costs for trawlers, and weather conditions in the North Atlantic. In other words, the single largest ingredient in your product is priced by forces completely outside your control. Over the past decade, wholesale fish prices have increased significantly. A decade ago, a chip shop owner might have paid 3 to 4 pounds per kilogram for quality cod fillets. Today, that same quality costs 6 to 9 pounds per kilogram, depending on supply conditions and time of year. That increase has not happened in a straight line. Fish prices spike when quotas are cut, when storms reduce catches, when fuel costs for fishing vessels rise, or when the pound weakens against the currencies of major supplying nations like Iceland and Norway. A sudden spike in fish prices can cut a chip shop's margins in half within a matter of weeks, with no time to adjust menu prices without risking customer pushback. The fish is battered and fried. The batter costs relatively little: flour, water, and a raising agent. But the oil the fish is fried in is another volatile commodity cost. Most chip shops use either palm oil, rapeseed oil, or a blend specifically formulated for high-temperature frying. Oil prices are influenced by global agricultural commodity markets. When vegetable oil prices spiked in 2022, many chip shop owners saw their oil costs double within months. A busy shop using 100 liters of oil per week at 2 pounds per liter faces an annual oil cost of around 10,000 pounds. When that price doubles, the annual cost jumps to 20,000 pounds, and that entire increase comes directly out of profit, because you cannot easily charge customers double for the same portion. Then there are the chips. Potatoes sound cheap, and compared to fish they are. But the specification matters enormously. Not every potato makes a good chip. The fish and chip trade relies on specific varieties, primarily Maris Piper, that have the right starch content, the right moisture level, and the right size to produce a chip that is crisp on the outside and fluffy on the inside. These varieties are bought from specialist suppliers who grade them for size and quality. A bag of chipping potatoes costs significantly more than a bag of generic potatoes from a supermarket. A busy chip shop might go through 50 to 100 kilograms of potatoes per day. At 30 to 40 pence per kilogram, that is an annual potato cost of 6 to 15,000 pounds. Less dramatic than fish, but not trivial, and also subject to weather-driven price swings. A bad growing season can push potato prices up by 30 to 50%. Now let us do the margin calculation that actually determines whether a chip shop survives. A standard portion of fish and chips might sell for 7 to 9 pounds in most parts of England. Higher in London and tourist areas, slightly lower in some northern towns. The food cost for that portion breaks down roughly as follows. The fish fillet costs the shop somewhere between £1.50 and £3, depending on species size and current market prices. The chips cost around 30 to 50 pence per portion. The batter adds around 10 pence. The oil used in frying adds roughly 15 to 25 pence per portion. The wrapping or container adds another 10 to 20 pence. Total food cost for a single portion of fish and chips runs roughly £2.50 to £4. At a selling price of £8, that gives a gross food margin of around 50 to 68%. That sounds healthy. Here is why it is not as comfortable as it looks. From that gross margin, you must now subtract every other cost of running the business. Rent for a high street unit in a decent trading position runs anywhere from 10 to 40,000 pounds per year, depending on town and location. Business rates add another 5 to 15,000. Electricity for running fryers, extraction, refrigeration, lighting, and heating runs 10 to 20,000 pounds per year. And this is one of the most punishing costs in the business because chip shops are extraordinarily energy intensive. Those fryers are burning gas or electricity at high temperatures for 8 to 12 hours a day. Staff costs are the single largest expense after food. Even a small takeaway operation needs at minimum 2 people during service, someone frying and someone serving and wrapping. A sit-down operation needs counter staff, a fryer, possibly a second cook, and cleaning staff. The national living wage in the UK as of 2025 sits at over £11 per hour for a shop open 60 hours a week, with an average of 3 staff working at any given time. Total wage costs, including employer national insurance contributions and pension auto-enrollment, can easily reach £80,000 to £120,000 per year. That is a number that shocks many first-time owners because it means staffing alone can consume 40 to 50% of total revenue. Then come the costs that individually seem small, but collectively are enormous. Waste oil collection, equipment maintenance, and the inevitable breakdowns of fryers that run at high temperatures all days every day. Pest control, because where there is food waste, there are always rats, and without a pest control contract, your hygiene rating is at risk. Cleaning supplies, packaging, menu printing, accountancy fees, till rolls, card payment processing fees that take 1 to 2% of every transaction, insurance covering public liability, employer's liability, product liability, and property, marketing, even if it is just a basic social media presence and an occasional leaflet drop. These miscellaneous costs can add £15,000 to £30,000 per year to your overheads. Run all of those numbers, and here is what the real economics of a chip shop look like. A well-run takeaway chippy in a decent location might generate £300,000 to £600,000 in annual revenue. From that revenue, food costs consume 30 to 40%. Staffing consumes 25 to 35%. Rent and rates consume 5 to 15%. Energy consumes 3 to 7%. All other operating costs consume another 5 to 10%. What remains is a net profit margin that for a well-managed shop typically sits between 5 and 12%. On revenue of £400,000, that translates to £20,000 to £50,000 of actual profit per year. For a business that requires the owner to work 50 to 60 hours per week, often starting at 7 in the morning to prep potatoes and finishing at 10 at night after cleaning down the fryers. When you divide that profit by the hours worked, many chip shop owners are earning less per hour than their own employees, and that is in a good year. In a bad year, the picture is grimmer. Fish prices spike, energy costs jump. A competitor opens nearby. Roadworks divert traffic away from your shopfront for 3 months. A bad hygiene inspection tanks your rating and customer confidence drops. Any 2 of those events hitting in the same year can push a chip shop from modest profit into outright loss. And the fixed costs, the rent, the rates, the equipment finance, those do not care whether you had a bad month. They arrive regardless. There is a seasonal pattern to this business that shapes the entire financial year. Fish and chip shops see their strongest trade on Fridays, a tradition rooted in the Christian practice of abstaining from meat on Fridays that has long since become a secular habit. A typical chippy does 20 to 30% of its entire weekly revenue on Friday alone. Summer months bring increased trade in coastal and tourist locations, but can actually reduce trade in residential areas as people go on holiday or eat lighter meals. Winter is generally stronger for the traditional chippy because hot, hearty food sells better in cold weather. But winter also brings the highest energy costs for heating the shop and running the fryers in a cold building. The week between Christmas and New Year is often dead. January sees customers cutting spending after the holiday season. These fluctuations mean cash flow management is not just important, it is survival. The owner who spends a strong summer as if every month will look like July finds themselves scrambling to cover costs in a quiet January. There is another dimension to the economics that most people outside the trade do not know about, and it involves the relationship between a chip shop and its local council in ways that go beyond hygiene. Inspections. Planning permission for a hot food takeaway is a specific use class under the planning system. Local authorities can and do restrict where hot food takeaways can open. Many councils have policies limiting the concentration of takeaways on any given street. Some have introduced exclusion zones around schools, preventing any new hot food takeaway from opening within 400 meters of a school. If you find what looks like a perfect unit in a perfect location, and the council's planning policy prohibits a new takeaway there, your entire business plan collapses before it begins. Existing chip shops that already have planning permission carry that permission as part of the property's value, which is why established chip shops sell for a premium over empty units, even if the equipment is outdated. You are not just buying a fryer and a counter. You are buying the right to operate, which in some locations is worth more than the physical contents of the shop. The question of whether to buy an existing chip shop or start from scratch is one of the most consequential decisions a new owner faces. Buying an existing business gives you an established customer base, a proven location, trained staff who know the operation, supplier relationships already in place, and crucially, the planning permission and food business registration already secured. A going concern chip shop typically sells for 1 to 4 times its annual net profit on top of the value of fixtures and fittings. So, a shop generating 50,000 pounds of annual profit might sell for 150 to 250,000 pounds, including the equipment and the lease assignment. Starting from scratch costs less up front, but means building everything from zero. No customers, no reputation, no guarantee that the location will draw the trade you need, and 6 to 12 months of operating below break-even while the business establishes itself. During that period, every month's losses come directly from your capital reserves. Now here is the part that quietly determines the fate of most chip shops, and it has nothing to do with fish or fryers. It is about what economists would call your competitive moat. And in this business, that moat is almost entirely built on 2 things: consistency and location. A chip shop does not have a brand in the way a restaurant or a retail chain does. It has a reputation, and that reputation is built one portion at a time over years. The customers who come every Friday come because they know what they are going to get. The batter will taste the same, the chips will be cooked the same way, the portions will be the same size. The moment quality drops, or portion sizes shrink, customers notice immediately, and they have 6 other options within a 10-minute drive. Loyalty in this business is real but fragile. It takes years to build, and a single bad month to damage. Location is the other half of the moat. Just like a gym, 80% of a chip shop's regular customers live or work within a 10 to 15-minute radius. You are not serving a city. You are serving a neighborhood. And within that neighborhood, the income level, the population density, the foot traffic patterns, and the competition all determine your ceiling. A chip shop in a residential area with 10,000 people within a mile radius and no direct competitor has a fundamentally different earning potential than the same shop on a street with 3 other takeaways within 200 meters. The math does not care how good your fish is if there are too many fryers chasing too few customers. There is one more financial reality that deserves attention because it is the one that has squeezed the industry hardest in recent years. The simultaneous pressure of rising input costs and customers' resistance to price increases. Between 2020 and 2025, the British fish and chip trade faced a cascade of cost increases that compressed margins to historic lows. Wholesale fish prices rose by 30 to 50%. Cooking oil prices doubled at their peak. Energy costs surged by 50 to over 100%. Minimum wage increases pushed staffing costs up by 15 to 20%. The national living wage is legislated to keep rising. Packaging costs increased as paper and cardboard prices rose and as regulations pushed shops away from cheaper polystyrene containers toward more expensive recyclable or compostable alternatives. During the same period, customer sensitivity to price increases intensified as the cost of living crisis reduced household disposable income. A chip shop that needed to raise prices by 20% to maintain its margins risked losing 20% of its customers who could no longer justify the expense. Many owners absorbed cost increases rather than pass them on, watching their already thin margins shrink to almost nothing. Industry bodies estimated that thousands of fish and chip shops closed permanently across the UK between 2020 and 2025, with some estimates suggesting the total number of chip shops in the country fell from over 10,000 to closer to 8,000. Every one of those closures represents an owner who could not make the arithmetic work anymore. And yet, some chip shops thrive. The ones that survive and genuinely prosper tend to share certain characteristics. They are in locations with strong foot traffic or loyal residential catchments, with limited direct competition. They are obsessive about consistency and product quality. They manage their costs with forensic attention to detail, tracking food cost percentage weekly, not monthly, monitoring oil usage per portion, scheduling staff precisely to demand rather than overstaffing quiet periods. They have diversified their revenue beyond just fish and chips, adding pies, sausages, chicken, curry sauce, and sides that carry higher margins than fish. They have built a genuine relationship with their local community, so the customers feel a sense of loyalty and ownership that goes beyond just the food. And critically, the owners have accepted that this is a physically demanding, operationally intensive, 7-day-a-week commitment that pays a modest income in exchange for independence and the satisfaction of feeding their community. The fish and chip shop is one of the most iconic businesses in Britain. It is embedded in the national identity in a way that almost no other food business is. But identity and economics are different things. The romance of running a chippy, the sizzle of the fryer, the queue out the door on a Friday night, the generations of families who have come to your counter, none of that changes the arithmetic. The arithmetic says this is a thin margin business in a rising cost environment where the owner's income depends on getting dozens of small details right every single day. Get them right, and you can make a decent living doing something that genuinely matters to the people around you. Get a few of them wrong, and the business will consume your savings as efficiently as a fryer consumes oil. If you are thinking about opening a chip shop, do not start with the menu. Start with the spreadsheet, because the fryer does not care about your dreams. It only cares about the numbers. If you found this breakdown valuable and you want to understand the real economics behind the businesses and industries that shape everyday British life, subscribe to Money Framework British. We examine the numbers that others overlook and reveal the machinery behind the money. New analysis every week. Hit subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.